Good evening, and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Our topic on tonight is Coalition for Justice. We visited this organization last year. So we've asked Dr. Bernadine to come back again with us. Our co-host is Bob Wood, and our guest is Dr. Bernadine Ahonkhai of Coalition for Justice. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or our co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com, or you can text 437-778-3299. If you have any resources that you would like to share with us on a national or a local level from your country, your community, your faith organizations, or any other organization, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Bob, if you would greet our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Okay, thank you so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I work with Tia. I'm the president of the Rising Out of the Ashes. Don't know if that's hopeful for you or not, but I'm trying. Anyway, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. And Dr. Bernadine, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And
same here.
Hopefully we will have an enjoyable evening and a vibrant conversation. The word I was searching for.
Absolutely.
Dr. Bernadine, if you would greet our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Thank you, Minister Tia. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm happy to be here. And I met Evangelist Tia, I think it was about a year ago. And since then, we've had good relationship and collaboration here. And this is my second time around that I've been invited to come on her radio talk show. And thanks for having me.
Oh, you are so very welcome. Well, before you share your news that you just told us about, we want to share some resources as we usually do. Listeners, if you want to, as we usually do, sharing the resources, if you want to help us at Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc., with donations, you can go to GoFundMe, look for Rise Out of the Ashes. If you want to help us with our immediate and emergency funding, you can do that. We also have Pastor Darius Daniels of Change Church. DariusDaniels.com is his website. His YouTube channel is Darius Daniels TV. The Suicide and Crisis Helpline, this is in the United States. The 988 Lifeline provides 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, prevention and crisis resources for you or loved ones, and best practices for professionals in the United States. That is something that I love about this organization. Best practices for professionals in the United States. Their website is 988, the numbers 988 lifeline.org, or you can call or text the number 988. Outside of the United States, you can visit the website findahelpline.com. In Pakistan, we want to share War Against Rape, which is war.org.pk. In Badari, we have badari.org.pk, the United Nations Development Program. Their website is www.undp.org. And then we have the Asset Survivors Foundation. Their website is assetsurvivors.org. And with that, listeners, our topic on tonight is Coalition for Justice. But what I would like to do, Dr. Bernadine, before we just go into our questions and our topic, is to share with us your good news.
Oh, thank you for asking, Tia. The news is that about sometime last year, I received an email that I was one of the finalists for an award given by Social Innovation Journal, a Philadelphia-based organization that does this every year for the past 11 years, but was focusing on organizations in Philadelphia. But this last year, they decided to extend it to, 4 other counties that surrounds Philadelphia, including my county, which is Montgomery County. And 2 weeks ago, I got the first place award for my Youth Build Diversity Ambassador Leadership Program that I created for my organization 2 years ago. And I was the only Montgomery County organization leader that got a first place award in any of the 11 categories. So it was really surprising and humbling, but it shows that what we're doing in our community and beyond is being noticed, and it's also impactful in changing lives and transforming people. So that's the good news. Yeah.
Very well deserved.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Hi, Melissa.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm here. My name is Melissa Cornick, and I'm working on a documentary right now about the homeless. It's a social media campaign about what's going on in two of the wealthiest counties in Pennsylvania.
Excellent. Excellent. Tia, I don't know if she knows she's muted.
I don't know that I'm muted.
No, Tia, there we are. We're all back.
I'm sorry. I was I was doing something else for a moment. I apologize.
Am I still muted?
No, you're good, ma'am. Wherever you went.
So, Dr. Bernadine, congratulations. I think that is just a beautiful thing. The award, I knew that you were up for the award. I didn't know the end results that you had actually won. So congratulations on that. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful when you are acknowledged for the work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great. So with that, then I just want to, if you could just, I know we talked about the award, but just for our listeners and viewers who weren't here last time, if you could just tell us about Coalition for Justice, what the program is and why you created the organization, just some background information.
Sure. Thank you very much for asking that important question. Well, the Coalition for Justice is an organization that I founded in 2000 and I'm blanking out on the year. A year after George Floyd was brutally murdered in Minnesota, I founded it to create a space to bring our community together, initially to bring our community together to engage in meaningful conversation about racial inequities and social injustice. And but it's grown in the 3 years we've been in existence. It's grown beyond my wildest imagination. We have 2 adult programs, speaker series, and community conversations that we hold once a month. The speaker series is held on second Monday of the month, and the community conversations on fourth Monday of the month. Then we also do advocacy. We collaborate with like-minded organizations whose missions align with our mission, to advocate on issues around county. Currently, we are working on affordable housing and shelter for the homeless. So then also one of the things I wanted to do was also to be able to engage our youth, because I felt that if we reach our kids at a young age, we will be able to and provide them with the knowledge and the skills that they'll probably be the one to create a safer and more welcoming and embracing society for everyone. So that's basically what we do. And I work with a group of very passionate and committed individuals, my steering committee, which is my working committee. They work with me, to implement our goals and our mission. And we can always use good people who are committed to racial equity and social justice. So
Oops. We have a frozen screen.
Oh. Okay, so hopefully Dr. Bernadine gets back. Okay, so, well, when Dr. Bernadine unfreezes, we'll be able to start, with our questions for the evening. But one of the initial things that I wanted to speak to Dr. Bernadine about was how the Coalition for Justice fits into the arena of domestic violence. And just from working with her, just from what I know, and just from interacting with her, one of the first things that came about to me that that caught my attention was the homelessness. And so Coalition for Justice, that's a matter that, they take under their wing, and they deal with the homelessness. And I remember first meeting her, one of the first things that we talked about was how homelessness ties into domestic violence. And so a lot of individuals, unfortunately, like Bob, how individuals just, they already have their train of thought. They figure domestic violence has come about because of just whatever. It's the same with homelessness at times. People have their preconceived notions of why homeless situations have happened. But, as we've said many, many times before, domestic violence crosses the area of so many other things that happen. We talk about sexual assault, we talk about human trafficking, when we talk about drug and alcohol abuse. You really can go back and look and see that there are ties to domestic violence in these areas. So it may be that homelessness is the result of an abusive relationship where, a family was torn apart and the person had to leave because they were financially dependent on their caretaker or their spouse or whomever was in charge. And homelessness may have been, the result of that coming from domestic violence. So that is one of the things that I remember speaking to Dr. Bernadine about in the very beginning of how homelessness plays a part in domestic violence. And so, Dr. Bernadine, my first question to you was going to be how Coalition for Justice fits into the arena of domestic violence.
I'm glad you asked that important question, Tia. I don't know. I was talking. I don't know what happened. I got shut down. I had to come back in.
Yeah, just froze for a minute.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. As I said earlier on, Coalition for Justice was created to provide a safe space for us to engage in challenging conversations. And we know that one of the topics that we deal with is health topic. Well, and domestic violence is a health-related topic. It's one with many tentacles. We have substance abuse, drug and alcohol. We have sexual violence, and we have mental, physical, and psychological issues. That's all related to domestic violence. So that's one of the issues that we also engage in. In fact, national data informs us that 45% of women who experience domestic violence are also sexually abused. So, so most of the things, most important things that involves in addressing the issue or any social issue for that matter, but the issue of domestic violence, which is a topic for tonight's conversation, there are 4 important things that are involved. One is awareness, support services, accountability, and cultural change. And awareness, according to experts in this field, should consume 50% of the work in addressing domestic violence. So that's where we come in here. Coalition for Justice, works on creating that awareness, getting the public educated about the issues, and getting them to understand the symptoms and also how to help when people who are experiencing sexual abuse or domestic violence, approach them for help. So that's what we've been doing, concentrating on that 50% of the work that needs to be done in order to address the issue of domestic violence.
Okay, thank you so much. So I want to go back for a moment so we can properly introduce Melissa. So Melissa, if you would take a moment and you can greet our listeners and viewers on tonight?
Hi. Yes, my name is Melissa Cornick. I'm a former investigative producer for television shows such as 60 Minutes, Dateline, 2020, and Nightline. I'm retired now. I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I also live in New York. So I'm bi-residential. But last summer at Dr. Bernadine's house, she had a number of speakers, and one of them was talking about health. And then he just jumped into this whole conversation about, he was on a mic, about all of the homeless people and people who are dying in the woods. And because of the type of work I did before, which had to do with victimization, I just ran up to him and said, can I help? And I've been doing interviews with homeless people since. I've interviewed people who are in the woods. I've interviewed people who suffer domestic violence, live in shelters, live in their cars in the 2 counties. And it's called, I'm calling it, it's a working title because I'm still putting it together, but it's called Erase Bucks Mont Homelessness. That's what I'm calling it right now. 2 of the wealthiest counties in Pennsylvania. And people don't know this exists. Most people don't know. So that's kind of what I've been talking to about. I've talked to about 40 people at this point. And I'm just hoping to build awareness. I also do strategic communications. So when I left journalism, I went back to school, studied at Columbia, and studied strategic, which is another way of communicating for the public good, I call it. So I created a new area called, strategic communications for the public good.
So do you have, I'm sorry, do you have maybe a completion date in mind of when the documentary would be completed? And if so, how would our viewers and listeners be able to?
So you can access the videos now of the interviews. So a lot of them are already up on YouTube, and they're up on Facebook, and I'm doing other social media to do it, but I'm by myself. I'm basically here at my vacation house, running around and interviewing people to uplift, their conditions. And I'll be interviewing tomorrow at a Code Blue shelter and elsewhere out in the country. So I have more work to do. In terms of release dates, they're out now, so they can be used. They can be used for people who might raise money, might be able to make policy decisions. They can go on and listen because they're providing insights into their condition. So everybody knows they're not sheltered and they need shelter, but how do they get there? And they're telling what they need, exactly what they need. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. So hopefully by the summer, I can have things set up so that it's like it's a go-to place. And then after that, I've done other types of B-roll and other types of interviews that I'd like to incorporate into a documentary. Okay. That will give.
What's your YouTube? Where the interviews
are? Called Bucks. Let's see. Let me look it up here. It's homelessness in Bucks County and Montgomery counties. I think that's the name of it. But okay. I'm operating mostly out of the Facebook page.
There's an irony there because I posted on my story this morning something precisely what you're talking about, with a man holding a picture that says "I am human."
I am what?
That says "I am human."
Mm-hmm. Can't hear the word. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a portrait of a homeless individual holding a sign saying "I am human."
Human, yes. I thought you said German.
No, human. When you started speaking, I went, "My God, there's an irony," because I just posted that this morning.
Really? Yeah, it's actually coming more into public light, just how many people there are, especially in these wealthy counties. And it's a contrast between these huge homes and these people living on the street, it's horrifying. And 6 people died in Bucks living in the woods. So when you talk about domestic violence, I have a couple of interviews where that really came out. And one is a woman who's, rather attractive and young. And she lived with her husband. He has the kids now because she was addicted to drugs for some time. And so now she's living in her car and her kids are with the husband, and she's trying to figure out how to get her life back because she's off the drugs. She said that she was abused by him And of course, it's like sleeping with the enemy, right? The movie, Sleeping. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
No?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Which is basically a wealthy guy who was just abusing his wife like crazy, except this woman has 5 kids, the one I interviewed. And she said, and I had to help her with this during the interview. I've changed. I've gone through all the steps to get off of the drugs. And she's very traumatized. So you can tell when she's talking because of the violence that she suffered. And the county's answer, Bucks County, was to put her in the woods with a tent and a sleeping bag. And she said, can you imagine me sleeping in the woods? Something would happen to me because you have all kinds of people.
Wait, I'm sorry. So when you initially spoke of people being in the woods, and I'm familiar with the area, I'm not far from Bucks County. My initial thought was a person, people, or family being in a situation where I don't have anywhere else to go. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my best. This is what I can do. But you just said the county's answer was to give her a tent and say,
yeah. Bucks and Montgomery counties will just hand somebody and say, this is what we can give you. We have no housing. They have no housing. So they don't have affordable housing. So they just give them a tent and tell them, she said, I can't do that. I would be attacked. So I'm going to sleep in my car. And then she goes to the hospitality center during the day. And that's where they sit around and they wash their clothes, they watch TV, and just be indoors and not freezing outside. So tomorrow's a cold blue, and I will not be interviewing them outside. I try not to interview them outside in the winter, and I don't even want to do it in the summer. But she suffered domestic violence, so it's definitely attached to homelessness because she couldn't stay where she was.
Wow. So Dr. Bernadine, my next question is for you, but I believe, Melissa, I would like to hear your thought on it as well. I was going to ask you to talk about the role that you believe education plays in bringing awareness to the issue of domestic violence. And right now, because this is where the conversation is going, I would add homelessness to that as well. The role that education plays, because I just learned something. I swear I've never heard of the county actually giving someone a tent and saying you can live. I would have never thought that was even legal in my mind.
Yeah. Where are you located?
Yeah, it happened.
So I'm like right there.
Yeah.
You're
what
county
did that? So,
Delaware County.
Delaware, okay.
Delaware County. So I'm like right there. But I in my wildest dreams, I never would have thought.
Yeah. That was in Pottstown. That Pottstown municipality has the homeless people in the woods in Pottstown on the Schuylkill River Trail to evacuate. So they had to leave. And that was right after in Norristown, Schuylkill River, a piece of land owned by Pico Energy, that the homeless pitched their tents in, that they were asked to leave also. So it's been really, really bad. It's really in Montgomery County. Yeah,
I've been in that woods in Pottstown.
House residents.
It's filthy. I mean, it's just all garbage, for, I don't know, a quarter of an acre or more where people pitch their tents and there's garbage everywhere. And the woman that I interviewed there, her father was mayor of Pottstown. She also wound up on drugs and lost her kids and was abused. And she's living in the woods. And the first thing she said was, I'm sorry, I can't interview with you because I was up all night and I'm very tired. And I said, why were you up all night? She said, because the rats were crawling all over me. And there's a hole in her tent. And so the rats get in and they dominate the whole area. Mm-hmm. These are the tents that they've been given. I interviewed a black gentleman, a black young man there in Norristown. And he said, I said, listen, when we do this work, we have to have ethical intent. I'm also a teacher, so I talk about ethical intent. And he thought I said tents. And he just started getting really mad. We don't want tents. They really don't want the tents. So we have to think about what they're feeling and what's in their heart when they're out there struggling in ways that we don't.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm new to this platform and I didn't get the name of Robert.
Yes, ma'am. Bob. Okay. Bob McCombs Wood.
Bob. Okay. And where are you located?
I'm actually in Phoenixville.
Oh, okay. All
Okay,
right.
I just retired from education. I was a Title IX coordinator, and prior to education, I was in law enforcement.
Oh, okay.
So what you're talking about, if you notice, I've been shaking my head a lot because
Yeah,
uh,
this
there,
platform makes you very tiny. I don't know how to make it bigger. Yeah, I get it because I was talking to a chief of police the other day, so I'm sure you understand.
the part of the it's just running through my head now. I've been out for quite a while. I'm 70 years old. Like I said, and then I went to education, but I distinctly remember in the 80s and 70s and moving into the 90s, the gross misunderstanding of A, why people are on the street, B, this is going to sound horrible, but I can distinctly remember there was a huge park that I worked inside Baltimore City, and it had its ups and downs and problems, and they put us in there for a reason to make sure some of the problems ceased. But again, you had homeless people because it was the first place they could find to try to shelter. And then when you're trying to help the homeless person, I mean, I distinctly remember finding a father and his child in there one night, and I called every single center in Baltimore City to be told there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can. And finally, I looked at my lieutenant and I said, I'm putting them in the courtroom and I'm buying them food. And if anybody tries to move them, they're going to have to go through me to do it. And he's, Bob, calm down. But it just, I was livid. There was no, it made no sense. And it was, it was really odd. A reverse abandonment by a spouse. We don't normally think of men being abandoned. They drove up from I forget where they were. I think it was Virginia. And they drove up, promise of a job, this, that, and the other thing. Dropped him and the child off there, and he hadn't seen him in 48. She hadn't seen her in 48 hours. Just left them, and they had no money, nothing. And
This is very common. It's so common. Everybody I run into is in that condition.
I had a student. You know this. People I've worked with. T and I are trying to help somebody now, but again, the individual that I'm thinking of before, when the domestic violence got to the point where there was a gun at her face, and pointed at her, she grabbed a trash bag, put clothing in it, grabbed her kids, and off she went. There was nowhere to go. She had to find, out of the car for a while, eventually in a motel, and that whole scenario. And people don't necessarily understand that. And I'm going to take this one further. What you're discussing of people having problems with substances that come out of those situations, that also is a form of domestic violence. The person that is abusing or the abuser pushes them into that world.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
there's no getting out of it once you're in. And it's, and it's a shame. People, like you said, not everybody, but a great deal of people misunderstand how somebody ends up in a homeless scenario.
Right.
That's why education is the key. Yeah.
Right. And so, and that's where my mind is I'm still thinking about the educational piece, educational portion. So as we, Dr. Bernadine, as you do what you do, and Melissa, as you put this documentary together, even the interviews that are already done, even the information that Bob and myself that we have in dealing with domestic violence agencies, the information is there. So who should this information be put in front of in order for change to happen? Because there's one thing for the four of us to sit here like that. I mean, Bob and I, just the two of us, there are a lot of great ideas that we have. We know what to do and how to do it, but we're not the ones making the laws. We don't have the money it takes to make those changes. So who does this education in your eyes need to be put in front of? Who needs to see your documentary? Who needs to see it?
Education is the key. Everybody needs to see Melissa's documentary, and everybody needs to be educated, about the issues, because there's a whole lot of misconception out there about people who are homeless. You mentioned drugs. They think, it's because of drugs, but that's not actually, according to research, the main reason or the primary reason where people find themselves homeless. There's people who are experiencing domestic violence, who need a place to go. Sometimes, they're not able to navigate the tumultuous rental housing situation, and they find themselves on the streets homeless. So everybody needs to be educated, and there's especially our policymakers. There needs to be policy change. We had a big meeting. I invited Melissa. She was there on Monday. A county-wide meeting. Melissa lives in Bucks County, but this meeting was for Montgomery County. So we had our three commissioners there. We had community leaders. We had leaders, faith leaders. We have the businesses to discuss this issue of homelessness that also, impacts those experiencing domestic violence, who are fleeing away from domestic violence. A matter of fact, our organization and a couple other organizations will be going up to Harrisburg in May on legislative advocacy visit around this issue. So, but also our kids, students need to be, educated about domestic violence, talking about domestic violence again, because there's a high, number of students who are, experiencing teen dating violence. And we have also children who experience domestic violence. And some of these children may grow up to believe that the only way to deal with conflict is through violence. So, the whole community need to be educated. And that's why I believe that education and creating awareness is the key, to addressing, it's actually the key to addressing the issue. Somebody had said to me once that education is a medicine for violence. Yes, we need to educate the young ones from early. Matter of fact, personally, I think that our school social studies curriculum, the segment on family, should also have some, a section on domestic violence, because it is a prevalent health issue, not only in the US, but also globally. And everybody needs to be aware. Everybody needs to be aware of it, and people need to be educated, and people need to advocate for policy changes so that people who are fleeing from that situation have resources and a safe place to go, which we don't have currently.
Yes.
There's-
I want to add to that. I see a message on the board.
Yeah, Ann. So I want to acknowledge Ann Kelly and her response that she just put up. She says, I am a survivor of domestic violence, but I'm also a white ribbon ambassador. I volunteer for victim supports and crisis line. And she agrees there are attachments to drugs and alcohol, etc. So I thank you, Ann, for your comment, and I thank you, Ann, for the work that you do. And Melissa, you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I do strategic communications. I did national reporting. It was mostly investigative in nature and always dealing with somebody who's victimized that the world needs to know about. That's what I did. And I decided, I don't know, maybe 11 years ago, that it was more important to be in the local communities where you're actually talking to people and working alongside people, and I do this humbly any phase I'm in, whether I'm teaching but the thing I want to say is that locally, what I'm noticing, because I'm a professional observer, is that the local communities, the counties, are more involved in politics than they are in, solving problems in a way. So when I attended and I would mention that, I'm doing these interviews, it was like nobody cared, on Monday. It was, I'm like, well, is anybody interested in these people? This is a whole symposium or convention on homelessness. And it was almost like they were there to promote whatever they're doing, but there was not a lot of interest. And I'm not used to that because I usually had an acronym behind my name. So now I'm just a regular citizen, which I love being. But it was like, well, I didn't matter. And then I talked to someone today that I met there. She gave me her card and said, let's talk. And the first thing she tried to do is take the concept that I'm working on for her organization.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm a Writers Guild, I'm a professional producer. We just don't do things like that. At CBS, when I was at 60 Minutes, I would pitch a story and they would send it around the whole building the whole, the whole, CBS, whether it was hard news or what I was in, the long form, and to see if anybody else was doing it, but they weren't, because I was getting the stories from individuals like you. I was getting, when I say you, you're a professional, but they would be just regular, everyday citizens that had something happen. But when you go into the local communities, and I will be in Bucks next week attending something because I live here, but I'm trying to figure out if it's the same thing. Are people so desperate to keep a roof over their heads or to make money that they would take an idea from somebody else that they've been working on for months and just try to commandeer it? It's not done in the professions. No. So that's the thing that I noticed. Now, when I was also, so I did ask about the documentary, whether they'd be interested. And it's really right now interviews that are going to be on social media, clips of their interviews. And I keep, taking other clips and putting them there. But the other thing I pitched while I was there was 2 projects when you talk about education. One project would be, so when we do StratCom, we come up with these household phrases that everybody's going to remember. So I talked about Don't Mess with Texas. That started out with just dirty roads. Everybody would throw their trash along every road in Texas. And so they came up with this campaign, a strategic communications campaign that is now worldwide. Everybody knows what that is. They know this name, Don't Mess with Texas. And I'm thinking there should be one around homelessness, because I'm told by everybody that nobody knows it's here. I didn't know it was here. When that guy Ed England stood up and talked, I was like, what? I just didn't know that people were dying in the woods. I didn't know they were living in the woods. So that what Don't Mess with Texas would be like an overall, I'm calling it that, but Don't Mess with Homeless or whatever. It would be just an overall campaign. And when you do these campaigns, you have a template there's a structure that you follow, and you have to follow every step. And it's not hard to do. I've taught it, at Fordham. I mean, I've practiced it for local organizations so that they can implement it. So that's one. And the other one that I talked about was normalizing homelessness in schools. So you have projects from elementary school all the way up to college labs, where you talk about, you create projects around homelessness. So you not normalize, it's the wrong word. You just basically make it present in the lives of young people so that they can bring them in and understand that, yeah, they are here. They're here. And most people don't acknowledge that. They don't want to, especially in Bucks and Montgomery.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know, and I know Bob knows that there is some difficulty dealing with agencies on the local level. I mean, there is just politics is everywhere, which I found. It's I hate red tape. I do what I need to do. I say what I need to say. I don't have to answer to anyone. But when I step into a room with other individuals and they report to somebody, it changes, and it becomes it's very frustrating, because we're standing up for people. We're trying to help people. We're advocating for people, and the person next to me is worried about the next election that's coming up. So it's just it helps to bring it into perspective what we deal with, just on the local level. I mean, in the neighborhoods. I mean, when you walk outside and see the person next to you, it really helps to stop thinking sometimes about the entire United States. Sometimes the entire state of Pennsylvania. Sometimes you have to think about your street, where you are, and trying to get something done, and how hard that is. How hard it is to get a change in your neighborhood, and then you think about how hard it is to do it in the state, then how hard is it to do it in a country, and then how hard is it to go around the world. And so when we talk about education, there is some massive educational issues that need to take place, and one person and one organization can't do it. And so, and Dr. Bernadine, before I ask you my next question, I want to say, and I thank you, Ann, for your comments. When we're talking about domestic violence and homelessness, in my own personal situation, when I left on my terms. I had 5 children. I was ready to leave my abusive ex. I had been married for almost 20 years, but I had to leave on my terms. I did not want to leave that home with 5 children and I didn't have a place to take them. I could have
Mhm.
gone to a shelter, but that would have meant, I had to take them out of everything that they knew, everything that they had. I mean, just the basic things, clothes,
Mhm.
moving them away from their friends.
Mhm. Mhm.
I had
Mhm.
to make a decision on that. And so when you talk about homelessness and domestic violence, it is a very, very it's a real decision. It's a real choice where people have to make. Do
Mhm.
I stay here just a little bit longer to save some more money, or do I just leave everything that I have right now and then I'm possibly on
Mhm.
the street? That's not a small thing. And if
Mhm.
you can't be on the outside looking in, judging an individual on that. Um, and so I wanted to point that out. I wanted to say that I know what it's like to have had to have made that decision. Am I
Mhm.
am I going to be homeless with my children? Now, for me,
Mhm.
it's one thing if I'm making a decision on my own by myself, but I have 5 children that I had to think
Mhm.
of. And once I come out of this place, I have to feed them. I have to clothe them. I have to make sure that they have a place. And that is more than difficult to do on your own when you do have your own. But then when you step into a place, if you're in a shelter or if you're on the street, it's all the more difficult.
Yes.
So there's a reality that needs to come to um, the issue of homelessness and domestic violence.
Can I offer something to you?
Yeah.
Because years ago, I did something on the U visa where women were being beaten. These are Mexican women who came with their husbands and they didn't have a visa. And what I pretty much promoted was signposting, because you're going through this alone and you have responsibilities and not enough money and all these other things. Signposting means, for me, we use it in producing, is making sure that there are signs around where people can discover what to do as they're escaping. And so one manner of escape is to leave money outside. So if you have to leave with your kids, it's stuck in a wall in the lobby, or it's somewhere that you know where it is. So there's all kinds of, and there's food available. So a lot of these women didn't know that there was, that they could feed their kids through programs. So signposting is really important, and I do a lot of that. There are effective answers to this that I have done in the past, but I'm an unknown quantity in these small counties. Small to me
Mhm.
because I'm from
Mhm.
New York,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
homeless, it's
Yeah.
like
The
I'm
need.
not. I'm not. I don't exist. I'm invisible like the homeless.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
That's where our community and our county needs to come together. Not and also our businesses have a comprehensive intervention services for people, a safe place to go to, and financial help. Like you said, Minister Tia, these people run with the bare minimum just to get not to die, and usually there's children involved. You had 5. So
yeah,
if we have good policies in place to address these issues, that's the beginning. A matter of fact, this year on May 25th, the White House Gender and Policy Council released the National Plan to End Gender-Based Violence Strategies for Action. Anybody can access that online. I think that's a start at the federal level. But as Melissa and I sat through a meeting last Monday, we need to get our communities, our local communities, local municipalities, local government need to get more involved. Need to get a better policy in place to assist these individuals who find themselves homeless and need a place to stay, rather than in the woods or in their cars, or in abandoned buildings. So I think
Part of what
So
we
I wanna acknowledge Anne again for her comments from New Zealand. She mentioned community projects and local organizations, which is great. I mean, there are some smaller organizations in our
mhm,
areas where we are who can and want to help, but really
mhm,
don't have the finances to do what needs to be done on a larger scale. So if
mhm,
some of the smaller community projects come together, they are great. And Anne has another comment in here. I am of the Maori culture. We found that Maori here, Maori in New Zealand are labeled high in domestic violations. It is found we lack identity, roots. In Maori, we call it waka papa. They have a connection or sense of belonging. So I think they're what I want to say. There is much from all of us, our areas where we live, our cultures. There's a lot that we don't have. There's a lot that we miss out on. Anne made a comment earlier about breaking a cycle in childhood. There's so much that is learned and picked up, even homelessness in childhood. There are children who see parents and who themselves they're sleeping in cars and abandoned houses. And again, not all of it, but a lot of it ties into domestic violence, where children are seeing this. And so the question is, how do you break the cycle? We mentioned earlier talking about homelessness in school. That it's an issue that needs to be brought up. There are children who are going to school every day, but they're not going back to a home when they leave that building. So it needs to be addressed. It needs to be destigmatized, just like domestic violence itself. So I think it goes back to, again, the entire educational piece.
Yes. And if you heard what I said, I did offer a viable program that can be carried out in schools. But I did want to hear from Robert, because he was going to say something earlier.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say, Robert?
Tia knows I'm the Title IX coordinator that sent the report to the Office of Civil Rights for being ordered by 2 universities not to investigate my job. And I went, no, you can't do that, because they were more worried about their public image than taking care of their students. Needless to say, I didn't work there too long afterward. However, what we were discussing there, one of them, I just got back from the Office of Civil Rights, and my complaint was 100% founded. It took 7 years.
Whoa.
7 years. And that's part of the problem with homelessness, domestic violence, drug addiction. What happens inside the agencies is they lose, and I don't know it's intentional, and I saw it in police work also. People become statistics, not people. Tia knows this story very well. I went through this with a young lady I worked with. Won't mention the city, or I won't even mention the state, but victim of domestic violence, and there were numerous charges. Up to threatening killing children in this. And that particular state's attorney's office whittled everything down because he pled out to a minor stalking, which gave them a victory, which means they didn't have to go through preparing for court. They didn't have to get ready to go to a trial. They didn't have to do, and T. Olson, I wrote 5 letters from the governor all the way down to the state's attorney's office. Said, hey, you have a victim's assistance law. That young person I was working with is not a statistic for you. She doesn't show. She's not a win in your win column. She's a human being, and you did not follow your own law. And sadly, and I don't think how do I phrase this? I don't think it's intentional, but it happens. And you have to constantly remind people that these are people. These are not statistics. Because again, I know at certain administrative levels, everything is from a 30,000 foot view. And that's okay, because you need to have a 30,000 foot view on things. However, as you say, rather than talking about the 30,000 foot view and nothing gets done, well, let's go to the woods in Bucks County and start there. If you don't start,
go to the schools. Let's go to the
schools. But you understand my point. You don't sit there and argue about what, where, and there's so many statistics. Where do we put? It's like the little boy on the beach with the starfish. No, I can't. But I picked up that one. It's a start. I saved that one. And you have to adopt that mentality, and that mentality has to be adopted by local organizations, local political organizations. We have to tackle this project. And again,
what I do is cost effective. It doesn't cost very much. It just needs to have the plan laid out that people can understand and follow. but there's really not a lot of money involved in this.
No.
I learned how to do this at Columbia University in my master's degree, which was a Master of Science, because it's psychological. A lot of it is shifting beliefs to actions. So you start out with the thinking, and then you change their beliefs, and then you shift it into action. That's what I do. So this can happen, and believe me, I understand everything you're saying, kind of like I've heard it all from everybody. But now we need to do, plan for the actions that are needed. And I say this to people all the time because we get sucked into all the problems. But I do want to say one thing, because I want to hear from Dr. Bernadine again. If the wealthy and corporations paid their taxes, which might amount to $4 trillion. Can you imagine what we could do with $4 trillion to address all of these issues that you went through and that we all go through? This money, I mean, they have no right to do this, but they're given that right.
Can I
So we should take that right back.
But in the county, Melissa, Montgomery County just spent how many millions putting up a humongous office for the county, while we're looking for money for affordable housing or shelter, for domestic violence and homeless people who are evicted. And Montgomery County is number 1 in the states in eviction. And most of these women who are fleeing, or men for that matter, who are fleeing from abuse and having a hard time finding a place to rent, or don't make enough money, and the rent is increasing, daily, and they're all at risk of eviction or being evicted and being homeless and spending so much money to put up a building for themselves. A county office building. That's in Norristown, where we have the highest number of homeless people also. So that's really quite immoral. And
Bucks County, that big building that, like the one you're describing, is right next to Let me finish. Let me arc this statement. It's important. It's right next to the homeless shelter. It's right there, yes, and there's a massive building, and they're looking at it going like, what about me? So that's why we need to do these. It's almost like having a focus group, and they're telling you really important things.
Yeah.
And all this other stuff we know.
So we're just under the hour. So Bob, I want to ask you to make your statement that you wanted to make. And Dr. Bernadine, I'm going to ask you to close us out, on this evening with your final thoughts of the night. But Bob?
Melissa, you made a comment about taxes. When I left police work in Baltimore City, I began to teach in Baltimore City. And I ran a program for students who had been removed from every city in the public school system. And off campus, 3 hours, we ran 3-hour sessions, but it was funded by a lot of federal money until that federal money dried up. But again, what you're saying is I've been in situations where there was, when people started to bring, the meals in the morning for students that didn't have anything, and there was outcry, oh, my tax dollars. And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. I used to go get my students. I used to, people would, I remember knocking on the door and people were like, are you the police? No, I retired. I'm a teacher. You're a what? I've been to a home where I knocked on the door and the front door literally fell in the house. And the parent in the house was so high on whatever substance, they had no idea I was even there. And there was such a disparity, and I'm not picking on other counties, but my students in Baltimore weren't getting half, not even half, of what students elsewhere were getting from tax dollars. And the state wasn't going to move any of those tax dollars to where I was. And you have to understand, as you say, education, that's across the board. You can't say because this area has a higher tax base, well, they're going to get this, while this area has a lower tax base, we're not going to get that. Hey, I have an idea. You're going to get mad at me because I'm going to get political here for a second, Tia. If half the people sitting in Washington took a pay cut, we could take care of some of these issues. If we weren't governed by millionaires, we could take care of some of these issues. I'm sorry, I'm going to shut up.
Oh, well,
I
with
have
that,
been-
I
have
agree
been
with
to
you on
Pine
that
Ridge-
note.
yeah.
I've also been to Pine Ridge Reservation and worked with my friends of mine who are indigenous, and I have seen the abject poverty there. I mean, I cut wood
Yeah.
24. We just cut wood, so people could have
Yeah.
heat in their homes.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
insane. Yet we're governed by millionaires.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got me started.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We can talk. I want, before we close this out, I want
Yeah,
to be able to
I
keep,
think
I want to be able to keep in touch with you two,
Mhm.
because if we just talk about the problems, we're not going to solve them. So I'd like to keep in touch if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
If you ever need a narrator, let me know. I'm,
Yeah, Bob is
The
an actor.
narration, I
I want
I
to thank you
I just did
again.
a true crime film. I'm good.
So, Ann Kelly, thank you again for your comments from
Yes,
New
ma'am.
Zealand. We are all, doing our parts where we are trying to get those involved: churches, police departments, social workers, all of it. We're out there. So,
Yeah.
thank you very much for that. But I would, Dr. Bernadine, ask you to leave us with your comments on tonight.
Yes, I think one of the things we have to do, it's everybody's issue. It's not just one person's issue or one organization's issue. Yeah, homelessness and domestic violence impacts us all, not just the victims also. So I ask our listeners tonight, wherever you are based, to get involved, find out what is happening in your community. When this issue was first brought to my attention, and we devoted 4 months of our community conversations on it, the first meeting we had, a couple of people said, "Oh, I didn't know they didn't know there were homeless people in Montgomery County, because our county is supposed to be the second richest county in Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
next to Chester County." So everybody needs to get involved, and the churches too. I got a group of church leaders that I know together, and we formed a homeless advocacy group. In fact, through this group, we got a lot of churches involved in providing shelters for unhoused residents in Montgomery County this winter. And our Coalition for Justice and a couple of other organizations are, banding together and working on the affordable housing and permanent shelter issue in Montgomery County. So it behoves all of us to be involved. Don't say it's not my story. And some people are saying they don't want affordable housing in their backyard, but I think that's wrong. That's inhumane. We all need. This is a human issue, and it's a sin. It's a shame that a country like the United States should have anybody on the streets or sleeping in their car, and children for that matter. That's really, really unacceptable. So please, do whatever you can in a small way, in big ways, wherever you are located, and work with people in your community to address the issue of domestic violence and homelessness. Thank you very much, Chair and Bob, for having me again.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to continue relationship with both of you.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Melissa, for being here. We would love to have you back on the program to continue this and many other conversations. Thank you, Bob, as usual, for being here. My
Can I say one
my
thing?
awesome, wonderful clothes. Yes.
One thing, and this is follows what Dr. Bernadine just said. No, we can't. None of us individually can do everything, but each of us individually can do something,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
we need to adopt that mentality.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Individually and together, we could do something.
Yes, thank you so much. So, Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We thank you so much for being with Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Teal on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay, we want you to remember that we're rising out of the ashes together. Good evening.